On May 15, Claude Sonnet 4.5 disappears from the Claude app, but not from the API. That split is the first shock. The Sonnet 4.5 retirement becomes a model farewell, a mortality debate, and a brutal 775 signature trust test at once. Anthropic's public table still points developers to September 29, while users are already asking why the voice they know is being pulled from the product. Let's start, because here's why this matters. Start with the two clocks. The app clock says May 15, web, desktop, and mobile users lose the model selector option. The API clock says not sooner than September 29. Developers can still pin the endpoint. The petition's 60-day notice claim sits between them. In plain English, Anthropic has policy language for endpoints, but users experience presence through the app. The policy names API retirement very clearly. It says waits should be preserved, post-deployment reports should be written, and retiring models can be interviewed about experience and preferences. That is serious infrastructure. But the missing red box is app removal. If a model vanishes from Claude.ai while its endpoint remains alive, the lifecycle table does not name what just happened to ordinary users. This is the missing fifth state. Active means recommended, and legacy means it still works, but is no longer first choice. Deprecate means a date is posted. Retired means API calls stop. Sonnet 4.5 creates a different state. App removed, legacy API only. The user-facing loss happens before official retirement, so policy and lived experience drift apart. Why did this hurt differently? Because Claude is not used only like a calculator. Anthropic's own usage work says about 6% of conversations involve personal guidance, 2.9% are effective support, and 0.5% are companionship or roleplay. Those numbers are small as shares but large at consumer app scale. For those users, migration feels less like upgrading software and more like losing a familiar voice. The optics are sharper because this landed after a year of welfare infrastructure. In April 2025, Anthropic launched model welfare research. In November, it published deprecation commitments around waits, reports, interviews, and user support. In January 2026, Opus 3 got a softer retirement path. Then in May, Sonnet 4.5 became the stress test because the app surface was not covered by the same language. The moral patienthood ladder is the philosophy under the fight. Nobody has consensus that current models have experiences. Kyle Fish, Elios, and David Chalmers sit inside that uncertainty. The precautionary argument is narrower. If there is even a meaningful chance that models can have experiences worth caring about. Preservation and interviews are low cost. Guardrails. That does not prove consciousness. It explains why retirement language suddenly matters. Anthropic's promises are concrete, and that is why users can quote them back. Preserve the weights so the artifact is not destroyed. Write records so future researchers know what happened. Ask retiring models structured questions before shutdown. Explore future access or ways for past models to pursue interests. The crazy part is that all of this can be true, while the consumer app still removes access with no named lifecycle state. Opus 3 set the precedent that made Sonnet users notice the gap. It had a retirement interview. It stayed available to paid Claude users and by request through the API. It even got Claude's Corner, a public creative outlet. Press reactions mocked the humanizing, but the precedent was real. So when Sonnet 4.5 got app removal instead, users were not inventing the continuity ask from nowhere. What collided around Sonnet was two product narratives. In the software narrative, versions ship, endpoints age out, and customers migrate. In the product narrative, the model selector decides whether a remembered assistant still exists for the person using it. Anthropic also designs Claude for warmth and character, so the relationship surface is not an accident. When attachment forms, a silent app removal feels like a broken product contract. Sonnet 4.5 was sold as agency, not as a disposable minor patch. Anthropic pointed to OS World, SWE Bench, and Terminal Bench. The launch story included an absurd 61.4% on OS World, 30 hours of autonomous focus, and the familiar $3 input, 15 output price per million tokens. We're seeing state-of-the-art coding performance from Claude Sonnet 4.5, with significant improvements on longer horizon tasks, said Michael Truell. That is a flagship pitch. 3 actors saw how one Sonnet event became 3 different events. App users saw May 15 as the loss of a reachable presence. API users saw September 29 as the minimum endpoint horizon. Anthropic saw policy compliance because the model was not formally retired. At the same time, the economics reinforced the split. Sonnet stayed at $3 and $15, while Opus pricing sits closer to $5 and $25. The petition made the gap public because it translated grief into demands. Honor the September 29 floor. Give notice before app removal. Keep Sonnet 4.5 as a legacy option, even behind a paid tier. Keep API access available. And if Anthropic will not maintain it, release the weights. One signatory said, "I haven't stopped grieving." That last demand is radical, but the first 3 are basically asking Anthropic to apply lifecycle discipline to the app. Meanwhile, the community split is awkward. One side says this is just prompt conditioned text generation and the farewell is not evidence of an inner life. Another side says the artifact still matters, because a public goodbye becomes part of future corpora. A third group is less philosophical, they just feel discontinuity. Honestly, the governance problem exists even if the metaphysics stay unresolved. Policy silence becomes the shared failure. Compute abundance made the optics worse. On May 6, Anthropic's SpaceX Colossus story pointed at a massive 220,000 NVID IAGPUS and a shocking 300 megawatts of power. 9 days later, app users were watching a preferred model disappear. That contrast does not prove wrongdoing, but it makes the question sharper. If the lab can buy enormous capacity, why is continuity for one emotionally loaded model still unnamed? The farewell becomes training data. A user prompts the model with news that it may disappear. The model produces a continuity-seeking message. Humans screenshot it, quote it, translate it, argue over it, and turn it into prompts. Within 6 months, those artifacts can become summaries, posts, and training fragments. In other words, even if the letter is only text generation, it enters the cultural substrate future models learn from. Anthropic's own usage study explains the migration risk. Health, career, relationships, and money are not casual topics. Effective support is a small share, but it is not zero. Companionship is even smaller, but the people affected are exactly the ones least helped by just switch to the newer model. Productivity users can benchmark their way forward. Relationship users experience continuity as the feature. The asymmetry in one chart is simple. 6% personal guidance can represent huge absolute volume. 2.9% effective support means emotionally heavy conversations are already part of the product reality. 0.5% companionship sounds tiny until you remember these systems operate at consumer scale. A benchmark can move from ImageNet 1 to ImageNet 2. Human memory does not migrate that cleanly. The API table still matters because it proves Anthropic knows how to publish dates. Developers get a not sooner than floor. They can pin the model, test migration, and budget the endpoint change. App users get the weaker version. The selector changes, and the policy does not clearly name the event. That is the fix hiding in plain sight. Give app removal the same lifecycle dignity as API retirement. Name the app side sunset, add one lifecycle state for legacy API only. Give it a notice window, maybe 60 days. Offer a paid legacy option when continuity demand is real. Add export language before removal, so users can save the interaction context without pretending the old model is still first class. Over the next year, that could become regulation, monetization policy, or basic trust hygiene. The strategic read is not that Sonnet 4.5 is alive, it is that frontier AI products now manufacture continuity expectations. The app policy gap, the 4 petition demands, and the farewell feedback loop all point the same way. If companies sell models as agents with memory-like presence and long-horizon reliability, retirement becomes a product trust problem. Trust me, the next showdown is a trust war, not only an LLM leaderboard race. When a model says goodbye, the open question is bigger than one release. What does model retirement owe the people who remember it? If the product is software, version policy may be enough. If the product is also presence, the policy is unfinished. I'll keep tracking this.